Hello there. Welcome into the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. And that app, of course, is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you, and I'd love to get your thoughts before you head into your weekend. 719-247-1313 is the text and the phone line. Or you can reach out via Twitter. I am at Gingerly Tweets. Would you like to meet one of the newest members of the Denver Nuggets? I thought you would. Here's Cam Johnson.
Being at the team's best in terms of ball movement, making the right plays, finding the right shots, and playing off of some really good players, and then defensively fitting into the schemes that they have. I'm really excited about that, and my goal, number one, is to win. And the teammates that I'm surrounded with, the coaching staff that I'm surrounded with, is such a great opportunity for me.
Going into every offseason, especially in the NBA, mock trades are quite popular. They are littered throughout social media, websites. This team should trade this guy for this guy. And most of the time, I get why. I understand the why of the trade, but so often they are a bit far-fetched. Cam Johnson has been mock traded to the Denver Nuggets quite a bit leading up to the offseason, because of his fit with this team. And it's not to say that Michael Porter wasn't a fit, because he was. But Cam Johnson would be an even better fit for the Denver Nuggets. So this idea that the Denver Nuggets were going to be able to acquire a player who has a lot of the same skill sets as Michael Porter, does some other things that maybe Porter doesn't do as well, defensively, cutting to the basket, and they're going to get him at a lower salary to the point that they would be able to then open up cap space to be able to go out and acquire other players. You see how a mock trade involving Michael Porter and Cam Johnson, you would look at it and be, that's a bit far-fetched. But this is the move that Ben Tenzer and John Wallace pulled off. And as I'm listening to Cam Johnson today, the fit, not just with the Nuggets, but with Nikola Jokic, is going to be phenomenal. And there's two reasons for it. One, I'll let Cam Johnson tell you what he thinks playing with Nikola Jokic is going to do for him to improve his game.
I'd say relocation around the perimeter, whether that's finding the open spot for a three or a cut. I know maybe his best ability is just understanding where he is in space and where his teammates are in space at all times. And so one thing that I've always worked on in my career to take next steps, to be able to be on the court, to be able to get playing time, is finding windows offensively. And so, in playing with a player like Yoke, it's I find a spot and there's a high chance that he's going to put the pass on time, on target. So for me, it's going to be a lot of that where I'm just, playing off of the guys on the court and then making reads off that. And that's how I love to play. That's my favorite kind of basketball. And so I'm really looking for that part of my game to, because I had a lot of less catch and shoots last year. I was a lot less of a catch and shoot around the perimeter. And so that might be something that gets a little bit of an uptick this year.
And you can start thinking about it all starting with the two-man game of Jokic and Murray. And Jokic has the ball, decides Jamal Murray, his number one option, doesn't want to go there. And then you have Aaron Gordon down in the dunker spot. And then you have Cam Johnson and Christian Brown cutting to the basket, or one of them cutting and the other one staying. Like, it's not that the Nuggets couldn't do a lot of this stuff with Michael Porter. But the more I watch Cam Johnson and the more I hear from him, I'm like, man, I don't know if there was someone available in the NBA that is a better fit for what this Nuggets team is than Cam Johnson. There are players that are better, right? Cam Johnson's not a superstar. But in terms of fit, I mean, I don't know how it can get any better. And this was, the kind of the new version of what Tim Connolly built. What he built was, from a talent perspective, arguably the best starting five in basketball. It got to that point. And Calvin Booth obviously helped it a little bit by acquiring Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Because when Jamal Murray is on his game, and with Aaron Gordon and then Nikola Jokic being the best player in the world, just talent alone, and Michael Porter, talent alone, they stack up with anybody. But it was also, and part of the reason why they signed all these guys to big deals was because they fit so well together. And if the Nuggets were looking to move off of one of their large contracts to try and gain some flexibility, there was a chance that they would get a player that doesn't fit what they do, as well as, let's say, they traded Murray or they traded Porter. But they were able to bring in somebody that fits exactly what they want to do, maybe better. Maybe better. So, but it's not just what Cam Johnson does, the movement of him on the floor. You can, when I play this next clip from Cam Johnson, you can start to think about how he and Nikola Jokic are going to mind meld at some point next season.
I think it's always come naturally, but with that, you have to understand that there's always a ton to learn. So when I came into the league after 5 years of college, and still I knew that there was a lot to learn. So I listened to the coaching staff. I had Ricky Rubio on my team, Devin Booker, who's my age but had been around the league for a long time, Kelly Oubre, just the vets around my position, just watching, observing, seeing how the game developed, seeing kind of the reads, the mindset, the work, everything that goes on behind the scenes. And so I've always just tried to cultivate that. I've tried to cultivate that since I was little. I used to sit down with a little notebook in my bedroom and draw up sets. I mean, it's just, I always loved the game. I always loved the mental side of the game. And I've always prided myself on that.
Nikola Jokic learns like AI. Right? He recognizes patterns, he identifies weaknesses, and he takes in information one or two trips down the floor, and by the third time he goes down the floor, he knows how to beat what a team is throwing at him. Cam Johnson can be a little bit like that. Not on Jokic's level, certainly. But given how much Cam Johnson thinks the game, and that was the question, I believe, from Vinny Benedetto of the Gazette, the biggest thing about Cam Johnson being his mind for the game, the way he thinks the game. And when you have the greatest thinker of basketball in the world in Nikola Jokic, to have a player that is that studious, has that thirst for knowledge, Can you imagine the two of them together? Can you imagine Cam Johnson picking Jokic's brain, talking with him? You're going to be a fly on the wall or to be on the court when the two of them are walking to the sideline after a timeout and what they may be discussing. Cam Johnson is a highly intelligent basketball player. In addition to being able to produce almost everywhere on the court. It's just, I mean, I've said it before, it's an amazing fit. It's an amazing fit, Cam Johnson in Denver. And it's why there's going to be a lot of new with this Nuggets team. Right? Haven't really got into that too much. New takes time. I don't know if this team is going to come out and be 13-1 over the first month of the season. It will take some time. But because Cam Johnson being the most significant addition, we have to call it what it is. The other guys are bench players. Important in their own way, but not as consequential as Cam Johnson. That's why it's not going to be like to throw out an extreme example, Luka and LeBron. Like, I think Luka and LeBron fit each other very well. But because of Luka's role with the Mavericks and LeBron's role for the vast majority of his career, you have two alphas, two guys that do everything for their respective teams, and now they're coming together. It takes some time, and there was some time that they needed to take to acclimate. I don't know if it's going to take that long for Cam Johnson to fit in and for this Nuggets starting five to be able to go on all cylinders. I think that there is a chance with the fit of Cam Johnson and the depth that they were able to acquire. Not that this is the be-all, end-all or the main goal of the season. I think they're going to win a lot of games. I don't think they're going to do it without having to sacrifice. Right? Last couple of years, in order for the Nuggets to strive for home court in the first round or a top 2 seed, they had to sacrifice health a little bit. But now they have depth. Now they have capable bench players. And even though they're replacing a significant player in their team in Michael Porter Jr., yeah, he's not Jokic or Murray, but he's right there. The next guy up, arguably him or Aaron Gordon. This is a significant change, but because Cam Johnson is such a great fit, it's not going to take long. And I think this team's going to win a lot of basketball games. The most important thing, though, is that this team wins a championship. Because I could talk about the fit and I could talk about the Nuggets putting up a ton of wins in the regular season. You really don't care about that. I mean, it's fun to have that as the season progresses. But ultimately, this season is going to be about winning a championship. And Cam Johnson understands that.
If everybody only defines successful seasons by the championship, then there would really be a small amount of guys at the end of the season defining their season as successful. So it's a wide range of things, and I think it starts with how well we can gel and how the system works and how effective we can be within that. But that doesn't take away from the fact that, yes, the goal is to win a championship, and that's why we're all here.
They made these moves to get closer to winning a championship, not to take a step back and then next year attack it. part of the fit that I have been talking about, and you'll hear it later from John Wallace and Ben Tenzer. They were it wasn't just about, hey, can we find a better player than Julian Strother? Can we find a better player than Michael Porter? I don't know that they got a much better player in Cam Johnson. I think it meant from a talent perspective, I think they're quite similar. They didn't get a major upgrade in terms of talent in exchange for Michael Porter. But they also didn't just seek out Tim Hardaway because he was better than Julian Strother or Jonas Valanciunas because he's better than Dario Saric. They may be that, but what they bring to the table, what they provide, is going to cut down on the amount of time it takes to get everybody's roles figured out. These are seamless fits that the Nuggets have brought in, and that's kind of it's always an underlying current with these trades and these acquisitions, and we've kind of talked about it, but not really put it into focus. It's not just that the Nuggets improved the talent on their team. It's that these guys address real needs for this team, and they fit. They fit so well with what the Denver Nuggets want to do. And that's why I say I'll take Denver as the biggest threat to OKC in the West. OKC's got some continuity. OKC, they're not going to need to take even as much time as the Denver Nuggets to get going this season. They're going to be a wagon. But if you told me OKC's not going back to the Western Conference or to the NBA Finals, I take the Nuggets over Houston, over Minnesota. You'll hear more from Cam Johnson in the two-headed front office of the Denver Nuggets, not just about Cam Johnson, but the other acquisitions. Jonas Valanciunas, most notably. What's his status? You'll hear that coming up throughout the show. For now, welcome your thoughts at 719-247-1313. Just getting going on this Friday edition of Drive Time Sports. I was just earlier today down at the Colorado College campus, the DoD Warrior Games going down starting today. They even had checked out the powerlifting competition that was going on to get things going. More sports, obviously, starting up tomorrow. And then I will be out doing this show at CC all next week. I was talking about it with some of the folks there that are on the media side of the Warrior Games, and they're like, we got so many people already lined up for you. And I'm like, awesome. So very much looking forward to that. But if you're looking for something to do this weekend, DoD Warrior Games, these are competitors from every branch of the military taking part in adaptive sports. It's a terrific event, and excited that it's back in Colorado Springs after a few years. Starting today, going all the way through next week. So DoDWarriorGames.com if you want more information on it. So Mount West Media Days has concluded out in Vegas. One of the big, I shouldn't say one of the big, given what is going on with that conference right now, it's probably one of the more minor things that came out of Vegas. But the fact that they're moving their headquarters from here in Colorado Springs to Las Vegas, a bit disappointing. Certainly didn't realize that was a possibility, kind of came out of nowhere. But obviously right now the Mount West has something very big on their plate right now. And that is this legal battle between themselves and the new Pac-12. To walk you down memory lane, the Mountain West, when the Pac-12 was gutted and left for dead as a conference, the Mountain West extended a hand and said, we will help Oregon State and Washington State put together a full football schedule. And the West Coast Conference did the same thing for Washington State and Oregon State in the other sports. And what those two Pac-12 teams, Pac-12 schools, I should say, proceeded to do was poach a significant amount of their teams. Colorado State, most notably, in our neck of the woods, but Boise State probably nationally the most significant of those. Pac-12 did that. And I can't sit here and say that I'm surprised. It is eat or be eaten in the world of college athletics. There are no friends. Everybody is cutthroat. Everybody's out to get one another. And it's what we've seen for a few years now. So it doesn't surprise me at all that what those two Pac-12 schools were doing the entire time, that both the Mount West, and give credit to the WCC for extending a hand to their other sports. But it doesn't surprise me, as icky, for lack of a better word, that they would do this. It's not surprising. And I would actually be more surprised that the Mount West didn't think that they would do that. That'd be the more shocking thing. But guess what? They thought it could happen too. They put in poaching penalties into the agreement. Because you think they're going to let the wolf into the hen house without some protections? They did that. And the Pac-12, or the Pac-2 in this case, still decided, even with those poaching penalties in black and white, went into the Mountain West and raided them. And so now the Mountain West is like, okay, pay up. I got to imagine, and I don't have insider knowledge here, but I got to imagine the Mountain West was hoping that that would be a deterrent. I think some part of the Mountain West, they would feel like, we don't want our conference to be raided. We would like to keep our conference together. But we'll put these in, and they will be quite prohibitive, and we'll do it as a deterrent. It did not deter. But so now the Mountain West is like, well, that kind of sucks, but you know what? We got a lot of money coming our way to be able to go out and bring in other schools and rebuild our conference. And what has the Pac-12 done? Nuh-uh. Mountain West saying, okay, give us our money. And the Pac-12's like, we don't have to. The Pac-12 is claiming that the poaching fees that are in black and white are not lawful. Oh, you can't impose those penalties. Yet they signed the agreement. If these were unlawful, if these were, going too far, why wouldn't the Pac-12 say, hey, wait a minute, you can't put this kind of stuff in here? Would it raise alarm bells? Absolutely. But if they thought that they were so wrong or unlawful or whatever they thought they were, why wouldn't they tell the Mountain West, we're not signing this? And I think it's because the Pac-12 said, you know what? We got good lawyers. It is our intention to raid this conference. And we'll just fight that battle down the road. And here comes that battle. In September, there's going to be a hearing to decide whether the Pac-12 owes the Mountain West this money. And all this week, there's been, barbs traded back and forth. I got to imagine I wasn't out there, but I got to imagine it's a little awkward. Not that, the football coaches or certainly the football players that are there from CSU, or maybe the coaches might have had a little bit to do with the decision to leave. But ultimately, it falls on the university presidents, the athletic directors, right? Got to imagine it's a bit awkward that half of the teams, or almost half of the teams that were there in Vegas, are leaving the conference. But I see all of this stuff playing out. And I just go back to my original feeling way back when the Pac-12 was gutted and the Mountain West reached out a helping hand. Merger. Why did it have to be a hostile takeover or one of the other, or a bunch of poaching? Why did it have to be that way? And I'm not in those rooms, so I don't know how the conversations went, but I look at it from an half inside, half outside perspective, and I go, why did it have to come to this? If the Pac-12 and the Mountain West together, if the Pac-12 is trying to regain autonomous 5 status, which seems to me like a long shot, but wouldn't it be better if they had all of the Mountain West? And then they go out and maybe add a couple of teams. Maybe they add a team out of Texas. Maybe they end up adding Northern Illinois, like the Mountain West has ended up doing in football. And they got the Pac-12 got Gonzaga. So if they put it together, you look and you can drop off some of the schools that these conferences are getting just to fill it out. I'm not going to call anyone out, but if you look at the list, there are a couple of obvious ones. Now you could bring in NIU in football, Gonzaga in basketball. It's Air Force, it's UNLV, it's Boise State, it's CSU, on and on and on. Let's go. And it's a strong West Coast-oriented conference that has a better chance of getting back what the Pac-12 lost than this iteration of the Pac-12 does. I don't understand why it couldn't have been that way. Why it had to turn into this big, ugly fight. And I got to imagine it has something to do with, whose name is on the side of the building. Maybe the Mount West didn't want to be absorbed into the Pac-12, didn't want to basically become the Pac-12. The Pac-12, because the folks there are very, they have a brand, they're the conference of champions, yada, yada, yada. They certainly did not probably want to give up their name, even though they were only down to 2 schools. That's the only thing, barring some other information that I'm presented with. They couldn't agree on what they're going to be called, who they're going to be. Now, there's more to that, right? Who's going to lead the conference and all of that kind of stuff. But it seems like it would be in everyone's best interest to just merge. Some people would, some schools it might cost them. There are some people that it might cost them their jobs. And I understand there would be some, as any merger, some collateral damage in there. But ultimately, it would be best. Now, instead, we have 2 lesser than conferences going into a legal battle. And I don't look at either one of these conferences and think that's a great conference. I look at these 2 conferences and say, even if their numbers are right to be considered a conference, I still look at it and go, they're each a half a conference. What is this accomplishing? And no matter who wins here, they still both kind of lose because there was an optimal path that they could have taken together. But we'll see. Either the Mount West is going to cash in a major way, just like the Pac-12 did. Don't forget, when the Pac-12 was raided, they ended up getting a lot of money. Either that's going to happen with the Mount West, or the Mount West is going to be left high and dry because a judge will say, yeah, those aren't enforceable. I don't know how, but I'm also not a brilliant legal mind, so I don't know. Seems like the Mount West has a case. And the Pac-12 is going to have to basically take all the money they got from being raided and just through and through go right to the Mount West. Could have been better. There's a better way out there, and for whatever reason, they didn't take it. So this will be the last year of the Mountain West as you see it. And this time next year, Air Force and CSU will not be conference opponents, which is maybe not the most eloquent thing I'll say. Stupid. It's stupid that they'll be in different conferences. To say nothing of how this split impacts all the other schools and regional rivalries and historical rivalries. But we saw it at the highest level of college athletics, and now it's trickling down to this level. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the executive director of the NFLPA did end up stepping down. In fact, the guy that broke a major story on him, Pablo Torre, is on my television screen right now. But the reason why he's resigning is not because of Pablo Torre's reporting. At least it doesn't seem like it. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in. Friday edition of the show. Appreciate you consuming today's broadcast in any number of different ways, including watching the show on our social media platforms at Extra Sports 1300, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. If you would like to involve yourself in the proceedings, I welcome that. I even cherish that. 719-247-1313. You can call or text into the show. Today was the introductory press conference of Cam Johnson as the newest member, one of them, of the Denver Nuggets. And Ben Tenzer and John Wallace were both there, answering questions as well. As you can imagine, most of the questions were about Cam Johnson, but there was a lot about just this offseason in general and some other specific acquisitions that the Nuggets have made. But there's a couple of things that the co-GMs said today that I found interesting, and you can certainly see it with the moves they've made. Here's Ben Tenzer being asked what initially the goal of the offseason was, because there was some talk that maybe the Nuggets would just run it back, invest more into the young players, and away they go. And now we're looking at it like the Nuggets have overhauled their roster, certainly overhauled their bench unit, which is where most of their young players reside. So what was the goal of this offseason for the Denver Nuggets? Here's Ben Tenzer.
I think going to the offseason, the goal was to add depth. That could have been by not making a trade and just making a couple signings in free agency. But our job is to always, focus on making the team better. And that's what we feel like we accomplished.
And here's what happened. And it just in case you're wondering, it's reasonable to think that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Bruce Brown would be Nuggets if all the Nuggets did was sign players to whatever exceptions or vet minimums they had. So I think there's a world where Bruce Brown is still back and maybe Tim Hardaway. Cam Johnson, certainly not a Denver Nugget, nor would be Jonas Valanciunas. And that's the other half of this Cam Johnson trade, is that it opened up the ability to go out and make these other moves, especially the Jonas Valanciunas trade. But the opportunity, and I want to give credit to John Wallace and Ben Tenzer, but the opportunity kind of fell in their lap, because if you go back to the trade deadline, the Brooklyn Nets were supposedly asking for multiple first-round picks for Cam Johnson. The Nuggets obviously would not have been able to pay that price, even if they wanted to. But in what I would chalk up to due diligence, they reached out to Brooklyn because Cam Johnson is a player that they see the fit, and they see the contract that Cam Johnson has as opposed to a Michael Porter Jr. Ben Tenzer's the money. He's the money guy. He's the salary cap guy. So it's not that the Nuggets didn't know about Cam Johnson or weren't ever interested in Cam Johnson. But if you go back to the trade deadline, he was out of the Nuggets' reach. But because Sean Marks didn't get any bites for Cam Johnson asking for multiple first-round picks, he lowered the price. So the timing was right in a way that it wouldn't have been if, let's say, Calvin Booth had called up the Brooklyn Nets to try and consummate a deal similar to this. He would have been rebuffed. So it's It's talent, it's acumen, and you give credit to the Nuggets front office, but timing is a part of this. The timing was right for the Denver Nuggets to make a move like this. And I can't imagine that this offseason was the first time that they entertained the idea of trading Michael Porter. We know that they have tried to trade Jamal Murray, that they have at least gauged the market. They had their eye on Cam Johnson. They would have loved to acquire him. The asking price was too high. It came down, and they pounced. So they don't just get a player that can fit in at least as well as Michael Porter does, if not better, with the personnel that the Nuggets have. But it opened up all this other money for the Denver Nuggets to add more. And part of the reason why you love this offseason as much as you do, if you're a Nuggets fan, is because of something John Wallace said today.
I think one of the biggest things we look for with all the moves is being able to adapt to what the league may throw at us on any given night without sacrificing our baseline and our fundamental approach to the game. And so obviously that's easier said than done, but being able to find like-minded individuals who can fit those roles. I mean, look, we've been in Vegas the past couple of days with Summer League, and these guys have popped in and out, got some time with our young guys, supported the games, just mentally and physically, they're there and ready to take on this challenge.
The Nuggets didn't just get more talented. They took what they already had and enhanced it. They didn't just, I was talking about this to start the show. There were players out there that they could have gotten that would be clear upgrades over what they had. But certainly with Cam Johnson, but you even talk about Tim Hardaway and Jonas Valanciunas, obviously, he's been a big conversation about his fit. All of these guys fit. The Nuggets are not reinventing the wheel here. And this was something that you got the sense from Josh Kroenke in his multiple press conferences that he had ultimately after he fired Calvin Booth and Michael Malone, that he just didn't feel like the Nuggets needed to change a lot. At least change their identity, change what they stand for, how they play basketball. He didn't feel like they needed to reinvent themselves in those ways. And I think, and I'll raise my hand on this, I think when you hear that, you think, oh, they're not going to do anything other than maybe a couple of veteran minimum signings. But here comes the opportunity to land Cam Johnson, and all of a sudden it opens up more money, and the Denver Nuggets can look to add more veterans, but the veterans that they added are not changing who the Nuggets are. And that's why Jonas Valanciunas, according to David Adelman, is the best fit behind Nikola Jokic they have had since DeMarcus Cousins. Part of the issue with the second unit of the Denver Nuggets is that they don't have anyone who even plays the game of basketball the way that Jokic does. And Jonas Valanciunas is not a clone of Jokic, but he's about as close as they've had to one. Again, since DeMarcus Cousins. Skill set, size, playing style. They're not changing anything. They're not reinventing anything. They were just able to find guys that can do what they love to do better and can be relied upon more than these younger players. And again, makes these moves, enhances these moves so much more. is that there will be time that, as Cam Johnson said, you heard him say this earlier, they need time to gel. They need time to come together. It's not going to be that much time. It really won't. Because these are complementary players. These are players that do a lot of the things that the Denver Nuggets like to do. Now, there is one of those acquisitions that we still don't have complete clarity on what his future will look like. Ben Tenzer was asked about Jonas Valanciunas and the likelihood he is with the Denver Nuggets.
We've had great conversations with him, and there's been nothing but healthy conversations in terms of him honoring his contract and him excited to be a Nugget.
And that's what I said. I needed to hear Jonas Valanciunas say he's excited to be in Denver. Now, Ben Tenzer saying it is not enough. I really need Jonas Valanciunas to say it. Because Ben Tenzer might be adding some color to the conversations they've been having. But he was pressed a little bit, and I think rightly so, like kind of once and for all. He's playing in Denver this year, isn't he? And that wasn't the exact question, but Ben Tenzer was pressed about Jonas Valanciunas being in Denver, and Ben Tenzer said, yes, he's going to be here. Still, I need to hear, I'm sorry, you're speaking in riddles while you're overseas. It would have been so easy for Jonas Valanciunas to throw cold water on all of this stuff. Simple Instagram post of him in a Nuggets jersey with the letters LFG with an inordinate amount of exclamation points. It's not like we haven't seen this before from athletes. He's been asked multiple times about it in the last couple of weeks, and never once has he taken that moment to at least say, I'm playing in Denver. I'm happy to be in Denver. So maybe I'm just being stubborn, but I got to hear it from him. When his introductory press conference rolls around, I got to hear it from his face on how happy he is to be in Denver. He doesn't even need to lay it on too thick. Just give the idea that you don't have one eye on a future move to Greece. That you're not disappointed that you're here instead of Greece. You don't have to go out and buy a house and do all of this stuff to entrench you in the community, but just some indication that what Ben Tenzer says is true. It's possible. Because again, it's not like Jonas Valanciunas has said anything. He's spoken in riddles. I literally don't know what Jonas Valanciunas has said. When I'm ready, I'll tell you everything. When, they're going to tell me the way they see it and we'll go from there. Like all of this non-committal stuff. I don't know if that means he doesn't want to be in Denver or he does. But I got to hear from him whether he wants to be in Denver. So look out for the next introductory press conference. It probably won't be the next one. That might be Brucey B returning to Denver. With Eurobasket coming up. It may not be till training camp that you hear from Jonas Valanciunas. But whenever that might be, you good? You happy about this? We'd like to know. Inquiring minds would like to know. 719-247-1313. One other piece of audio I want to share with you from Ben Tenzer, because there's been talk from his cohort, John Wallace, about a ball handling backup point guard, essentially being a need for the Denver Nuggets. Here's Ben Tenzer on the likelihood of one more addition to this Denver Nuggets team.
I wouldn't say there's pressure. We're going to be patient right now. We feel really good about where the roster's at, and if we feel like it's important to add a 15th, we will. But no pressure right now.
As in a 15th player. I think they'll add somebody else. I do. Between now and the season starting, there are enough names out there where you don't love one so much that the Nuggets have to strike right now. Maybe you prefer Chris Paul, but if they ended up losing out on Chris Paul because he goes with the other 2019 NBA All-Stars that are assembling in LA, so be it. If Malcolm Brogdon ends up signing somewhere else. We just saw Damian Lillard go off the board to Portland. That one may have hurt a little bit more because the idea of Damian Lillard being on the Nuggets is quite exciting. But even if some of these guys go off the board, you still are like, okay. As long as there's someone out there. And I'll give you the list. It's Chris Paul. It's Russell Westbrook. Monte Morris, Malcolm Brogdon, and I'll throw out another one. And please keep your eyes on the road. Do not roll your eyes so hard when I say this that you can't see where you are going. Ben Simmons. Literally all the guy does is handle the basketball and pass. And by the way, he has always been an elite defender. Okay, if Ben Simmons is the missing, not the missing piece, but just the last piece of the puzzle to be put into place with everything that the Denver Nuggets have done, not asking Ben Simmons to, save his career or anything. But the guy defends, the guy can pass the ball, and he can handle it. You don't need to score. Bruce Brown's going to look to get shots. Tim Hardaway's going to look to get shots. You still want Julian Strawther to take shots. Deron Holmes, with what you've seen from him in Summer League, he goes, 19-17 last night? Dominated that basketball game out in Vegas. Like, you don't need another guy that's going to want to get shots. And guess what Ben Simmons doesn't want? Shots. The guy is allergic to taking shots, no matter, regardless of anything else. Doesn't want to take shots. Don't make him take shots. They won't. All good. Defend and pass the ball. Chris Paul, I wouldn't be interested. Russell Westbrook reunion, no thanks. But Ben Simmons, Monte Morris, Malcolm Brogdon, if any one of them are available for the Denver Nuggets to get, it's good. So no reason, to Ben Tenzer's point, to be pushing things. And not for nothing, Al Horford's still out there. But with what you've seen from Deron Holmes, do you really want Al Horford to be blocking Deron Holmes' development? 719-24-7, 1313. Coming up next, there have been some bold proclamations about the upcoming Denver Broncos season. I thought I'd go through some of them and label whether they are an overreaction or not. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Training camp almost here, which gets us very excited as football fans, right? Means the season is just right around the corner. And in our excitement, we tend to get a little carried away at times with what we think our favorite football team will accomplish this upcoming season. And I have scoured the interwebs looking for bold predictions and have found no shortage of them. So I am here to separate what is an overreaction and what may not be. May not be crazy. Let's start with the first one, and I've seen this in multiple places. Bo Nix is the next elite franchise quarterback of the Denver Broncos. This is an overreaction. And even though I believe more in Jaden Daniels as a quarterback, I would say it's an overreaction to say this about Jaden Daniels at this point. Because we've seen it before, quarterbacks with a good rookie year and they take a step back in year two and they never recover. And right now, that's on the table for both of these guys. What the Broncos do have right now in Bo Nix is a young quarterback worth developing, worth investing in, worth pouring into over the next few years to see, in a way that Paxton Lynch wasn't, in a way that Drew Lock wasn't. And certainly what you saw in his rookie year, it just further fortifies that belief. There's no reason to start looking at Arch Manning or any of these, the kid out of Penn State. Like, you got a guy that is worth seeing. And even if he takes a step back this year, it's still not time to call it quits on Bo Nix. It's not. So, no, I can't say that to proclaim that Bo Nix is the next elite franchise quarterback. I can't get there. But he's certainly a quarterback worth investing in and worth developing to see if he can become that in the next couple of years. Number two, the Broncos have the best defense in the National Football League. This, to me, is not an overreaction at all. You know why? Because I just literally said this the other day. This is my bold proclamation, apparently. I didn't think it was that bold of a proclamation. The reigning title holder would be probably Philadelphia. They've lost quite a few pieces. They're still going to be elite. Really, when I look at NFL defenses, and feel free to throw in one that I may not mention here, but I got 4 teams that I think have elite defenses, and then they'll battle it out for who's the best. It would be Denver, Philly, Baltimore, Kansas City. Rank them in whatever order you want to rank them, but I think they would all be classified as elite defenses. And one of those, I would be willing to bet quite a bit that if I had those 4 teams and you had the field, that I would end up being right. That the best defense in the NFL will come from one of those, will be one of those 4 I just mentioned. And I think the 2 that have the inside track are Philadelphia, because let's give Philadelphia and Howie Roseman some credit. Yes, there's attrition from year to year. Yes, when you win a Super Bowl, teams, we saw this with the Denver Broncos, they want to go out and poach your players. But let's give Philadelphia a little bit of credit that they wouldn't in some way willingly part with players that they think would then destroy their defense. I like Huff going to San Francisco. I think he's going to have more of an impact there, but I don't think that anyone would take Huff off of the Eagles roster and be like, oh, well, they're done now. Part of the reason he's in San Francisco is because the Eagles couldn't get the guy on the field. So it's Philadelphia because I don't think that they were picked apart enough to really drop them in the pecking order. And then I have Denver. The contingency with Denver is Jahdae Barron, I think, has to make an impact in year one. He doesn't have to be Pat Surtain in year one, but he's got to make an impact. And Dre Greenlaw's got to stay healthy. I don't even know if Hufanga's health is as much of a determining factor in whether the Broncos are the number one defense than Dre Greenlaw, but they need Dre Greenlaw. Dre Greenlaw ties everything together in the middle of that defense. They have Surtain. They have the pass rushers. But their inside linebackers have been a bit of an issue for them. And by the way, I also like Drew Sanders quite a bit. But Dre Greenlaw, if he's healthy, if he plays almost every game and he's impactful, then I think that the Denver Broncos can have the best defense in the NFL. So that's not an overreaction at all. Number 3, Sean Payton will win Coach of the Year. I'm not saying he deserved it this past year, but I'm saying he had a much better chance last year than this year. I'm not going to say it's an overreaction because if I can see a scenario in which Sean Payton wins Coach of the Year. Do I believe that that scenario will come to fruition? No, and I'll get to what that scenario is in a little bit. I can see it. But I will tell you that his chances of winning Coach of the Year were far better last year than they were this year. And if not for, what happened with Washington and in some other plays, Sean Payton probably wins Coach of the Year. Rookie quarterback, getting a team to the playoffs, the turnaround that the Denver Broncos have had. Sean Payton had a stronger case last year than I think he's going to this year, but I don't think it's a gross overreaction to pick Sean Payton to win Coach of the Year because there is a clear way in which he can do it. Some of these other things, like I don't think Bo Nix can prove he's the next elite franchise quarterback this year. Sean Payton could win Coach of the Year. Not an overreaction. Probably not going to happen, but not an overreaction. How about number 4? Bo Nix will account for 40-plus touchdowns. Total touchdowns. He had 34 this year. Not an overreaction. Not an overreaction. And there are 2 reasons why. I think this is not an overreaction. That's a lofty number. But if Evan Ingram is what I think Evan Ingram is going to be, that's going to add a few touchdowns to his total. Could we see Sean Payton? And I think this is a big thing I'm watching going into this year. Is Sean Payton going to unleash Bo Nix? Everything was very regimented, very controlled with Bo Nix this year. And I look, in the end, it proved to be the right call by Sean Payton. But going back to that first one of Bo Nix being the next elite franchise quarterback, like, there comes a time where Sean Payton has got to let Bo Nix cook and let him see if he can do it. And I think one of the ways that we can see this, will he let Bo Nix, use his legs more? I know he doesn't want Bo Nix running wild all over the field, but does he say, you know what? I trust him. I trust his decision-making when he's running with the football. He has not carte blanche, but he has the freedom to run a little bit more. Could that get him a couple of extra touchdowns? The addition of Ingram, Bo Nix being taken off the leash a little bit, and also the fact that Bo Nix, we got to call it what it is, but it's understandable, wasn't great the first couple of weeks, right? There were some flashes there, but overall, he wasn't great. So I think Bo Nix certainly going to be more comfortable going into this season. I think there's more of a reason for him to be productive the first couple of weeks of the season. So I don't think 40 is out of the realm of possibility. That is not an overreaction. Now, what are his interception numbers going to be? I'm also interested in that. And here's the last one. And this is the big one. This is how Sean Payton wins Coach of the Year. I promise you. If the Denver Broncos dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC West, Sean Payton will be the NFL Coach of the Year. Because there's no reason to think that Kansas City is going to fall off a cliff this year. If you think they're going to fall off a cliff, then beating out Kansas City is not going to be a Coach of the Year quality accomplishment. But if the Chiefs are still going to be a good football team, which I think any objective observer would still say that Kansas City is one of the better teams in the NFL, if Denver beats them out for the division, then I think Sean Payton can win Coach of the Year. But the idea that the Broncos will dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC West, that is an overreaction because the Broncos are not even the most likely team in the division to overtake the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the Chargers. There is a clear pecking order in this division. Broncos got to get through LA before they get to Kansas City. There are questions on whether Denver can beat the Chargers. And I'm talking about, with the Chargers, I'm talking about winning a game against the Chargers because they didn't last year. But even if they beat Kansas City in a game, which I think they can do, that doesn't mean they're beating them out in the division. So if there is a team, and I don't think Kansas City is ending its run of AFC West, I actually think in many ways the Chiefs are going to have a bounce back year. Maybe not in terms of the record, right? Because their record was phenomenal last year and they won all those one-score games. But it's going to look a lot better than it did last year offensively for this Chiefs team. So I think in some ways they're going to be tougher to beat this year than last year, where they were a little bit more vulnerable because you didn't know who Patrick Mahomes was supposed to throw to on a week-to-week basis. So I think the Broncos dethroning Kansas City atop the AFC West, that's an overreaction. I don't think anybody does. But if you asked me to pick one team that would, if you told me the Chiefs were not going to win the AFC West this year, I would take the Chargers. Take your thoughts. Which of those are overreactions? Which ones aren't? 719-247-1313. Overreactions. Bo Nix is the next elite franchise quarterback. And the Broncos will dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC West, but not an overreaction to predict that they'll have the best defense in the NFL, that Sean Payton can win Coach of the Year, or that Bo Nix will account for at least 40 touchdowns this season. 719-247-1313. Back after this. The Black Keys are hitting the road on their U.S. tour. They're calling it the No Rain, No Flowers Tour, and we want to send you to the U.S. tour stop of your choice. Just text the national keyword ROCK to 95819. That's ROCK to 95819. Time's running out to get entered to win trip for two, 2-night hotel stay, 2 tickets, primo tickets to see the Black Keys at the U.S. tour stop of your choice. Full contest rules at extrasports1300.com. Are these overreactions for the Denver Broncos this season? Bo Nix, the next elite franchise quarterback, the Broncos having the best defense in the NFL, Sean Payton winning Coach of the Year, Bo Nix accounting for 40-plus touchdowns, and the Broncos will dethrone the Chiefs in the AFC West. How do you see it? 719-247-1313. Couple of reactions. If anyone dethrones the Chiefs, it will be the Chargers, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. So we are in lockstep there. And he adds that 40 total touchdowns is a huge overreaction. He had 34 in his rookie year. I don't think it's a huge overreaction. Now, this is why I say, what are his interception numbers? Okay. Because when I say that it's reasonable to think Bo Nix will take a step back, it could manifest itself in a lot of different ways than touchdowns, than having fewer touchdowns than he did the year before. Winning fewer games, making more mistakes, more interceptions, more fumbles. It can manifest itself in any number of ways. But you look at the addition of Evan Ingram, and this is contingent, too, upon Sean Payton letting him loose a little bit more. Is Sean Payton going to do that? But it's not, the game isn't, are these things going to happen? It's, is it an overreaction to think that that's possible? I don't think it is. There were 4 quarterbacks in the NFL last year that had 40 or more total touchdowns. Lamar, Burrow, Baker Mayfield, and Josh Allen. And you say Bo Nix isn't as good as any of them. I would agree with you. Jared Goff was 2 touchdowns away, and the dude doesn't run. Okay, better supporting cast, absolutely. Also a team that can reasonably run the football. If the Broncos' run game can't get going, could that add to Bo Nix's touchdown total? There were a few guys. Goff had 38, Darnold had 36, and then you go to Bo Nix at 34. With his ability to use his legs, with the addition of a weapon like Evan Ingram, maybe another year in the league will have Sean Payton trusting him a little bit more, and there's no guarantee the run game's going to get going. There was another one that I'll introduce. Broncos will have a 1,000-yard rusher. Nope. That's an overreaction. And by design. I think Sean Payton would see a 1,000-yard rusher and be like, didn't do my job. Didn't spread the wealth enough. So there are a lot of things that could come together to get Bo Nix close to 40 touchdowns. He was relatively close to 40 touchdowns in his rookie season. I don't think it's an overreaction. Will he get there? Probably not. But what I'm attempting to do is weed out the preposterous predictions and hone in on the ones that aren't totally crazy and start to discuss whether they can actually happen. And that's what I did there. Aaron called in during the break. And he does not think that the Denver Broncos will win the AFC West this year. But he looks at the two of the potential overreactions, Bo Nix with the touchdowns and the defense. And he says, if the defense is the best defense in the NFL, especially when it comes to taking the ball away, that's going to put Bo Nix in an advantageous position to put up points. And having one of the best defenses in the league, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, Bo Nix and this Broncos offense are going to be put in a lot of good situations like they were last year. This from the 719. Nix is as old as some QBs who have been in the league for a few years now. He's at his ceiling. He's close. We discussed this yesterday. He's close. I think he could get better. I think accuracy outside of the numbers can improve for him. I will grant every rookie, every single one, the idea that they're not at their ceiling yet. I will extend every rookie that courtesy, including Bo Nix. But there are some that are closer than others. Bo Nix is closer than others. Here's an interesting thing to bandy about. I think most reasonable people can say that Jaden Daniels was better than Bo Nix this year. I think that's reasonable. And I think people can acknowledge that Jaden Daniels had a great season. Who's closer to their ceiling? Because we know Jaden Daniels was higher than Bo Nix last year. Who's closer to their ceiling? I would say it's Bo Nix. Even though he wasn't as good as Jaden Daniels last year, I think he is closer to his ceiling. I think Bo Nix's ceiling is probably less than what Jaden Daniels was last year in his rookie year. And that's why you're seeing Jaden Daniels be ranked the 5th or 6th best quarterback in the league, and people really fighting the urge to dump Lamar Jackson or somebody out of this top 4 of Burrow, Allen, Mahomes, and Lamar and get Jaden Daniels in there. Because I don't think Jaden Daniels, as brilliant as he was last year, has hit his ceiling. And I think there's more room between what he was in his rookie year and his ceiling than there is for Bo Nix. Bo Nix is not Drew Brees. Bo Nix is not going to go down as one of the most prolific passers in NFL history. But I think Sean Payton really feels like, I think Sean Payton, if you gave him true serum, would say that Bo Nix, that the sky's not the limit for him. But I think Sean Payton's looking at it and saying, if Bo Nix can get a little bit better, especially in this area and that area, and he can stay there, I can do the rest. We can get where we want to go. I think he sees some Drew Brees qualities in Bo Nix, but I think he understands that Bo Nix is not Drew Brees. But I think if he believes if Bo Nix gets to his ceiling and stays there consistently, that they can win the AFC West, they can represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and they can win. And you don't reach on Bo Nix like the Broncos did unless you really see a guy that you can win a championship with. You could quarrel with Sean Payton, what Sean Payton's thinking, or what I think Sean Payton thinks all you want, and I would too. But clearly he sees something in Bo Nix. And I think he believes, even knowing that Bo Nix is close to his ceiling, that his ceiling, as long as he stays there consistently, is enough for the Broncos to win a Super Bowl. Time will tell. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, the three stories that are driving the show. Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you on this Friday, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, and you should check out the revamped website. It's nice. Or you can always listen on the Extra Sports 1300 app, and you may be doing that. And I appreciate you doing that. And that app, of course, is sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. We've been having a little conversation here over some bold proclamations that are being made about the Denver Broncos across the internet. We'll pick that conversation back up, perhaps, as we move throughout the hour. And if you want to have your say, 719-24-7. 1313, you can call or text it in. For right now, we go to the three stories that are driving the show. All right, story number one, meet one of the newest Denver Nuggets.
Being at the team's best in terms of ball movement, making the right plays, finding the right shots, and playing off of some really good players, and then defensively fitting into the schemes that they have. I'm really excited about that, and my goal, number one, is to win. And the teammates that I'm surrounded with, the coaching staff that I'm surrounded with is such a great opportunity for me.
That is Cam Johnson, who met the media earlier this afternoon. Despite the number of changes that the Nuggets have made, don't lose sight of what this season is. This team is expected to compete for a championship. Now, are they going to go into it as the favorites? No, because Oklahoma City exists and is unchanged from one year to the next. But what the Denver Nuggets got to get to a rematch. Got to see that. The Nuggets are expected to win, and Cam Johnson can help them with that because of the fit that he is. But one of the things that stuck out to me about what Cam Johnson said today and what I think he's going to be is an extension of Nikola Jokic's brain. The more the two of them work together, talk with each other, because of Cam Johnson's ability to really score at every level, right? There's not, he can drive the rim. He's got a decent mid-range game. He even said it today that he didn't do a lot of catch and shoot last year. What he didn't say is because his team was poor. But he can do that, like Michael Porter did. Because he can score at every level. Because there's not one part of the floor that he likes to stick at. The more he and Jokic work together, the more that Cam Johnson is going to be able to anticipate what Nikola Jokic wants to do. And if he does that, then he's going to find a lot of open shots for him at every spot on the floor. I think that more than anything else is what I'm really interested to see, is how quickly the two of them come together, how quickly the two of them understand each other and can work together. Because that's where Cam Johnson becomes a better fit for this Nuggets team than even Michael Porter was, who was a great fit. But what's between Cam Johnson's ears is right now kind of what I'm more fascinated with. Because if that can be an extension of what's between Jokic's ears, then this duo has a chance to be absolutely dynamite, which will, of course, lead to wins. Here's more on the Nuggets and another one of their acquisitions, the subject of story 2.
We've had great conversations with him, and there's been nothing but healthy conversations in terms of him honoring his contract and him excited to be a Nugget.
Ben Tenzer, what he hopes once and for all, putting to bed the idea that Jonas Valanciunas may not be in the Denver Nuggets uniform this upcoming season. The last part of what he said to me is newish. I've heard that he's going to honor his contract stuff, and I know that the Nuggets acquired him with every expectation he'd be there, and they are in no mood to let him walk away and go to Greece. Knew all that already. That last part, that he's excited to be in Denver. Okay, I need to hear it from him. Because he's had multiple opportunities here over the last few weeks to say something to that effect. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. Doesn't have to go over the top. Doesn't have to get the Colorado flag tattooed somewhere on him. But I just haven't gotten the sense from the quotes that I have seen from him that he's super excited to be in Denver. Or there is a place that he would rather be. Maybe in terms of the NBA, Denver's about the best spot he can be in. But does he want to be in the NBA at all? So if what Ben Tenzer says is true, got to confirm it with Jonas Valanciunas. And we may not get that opportunity until training camp with Eurobasket coming up. We may not have a Jonas Valanciunas introductory press conference. But at some point, he's going to speak. And he's going to speak to Nuggets reporters that don't care about anything else other than, are you good with this arrangement? Are you good being here? But I think it has been made abundantly clear that he will be in Denver. But is he going to be pulling in the same direction as everybody else? That's what I got to hear from him. And even more importantly than that, that's what I got to see from him when he does indeed arrive in Denver. Let's go to the other half of the brain trust with the Denver Nuggets. Here's John Wallace talking about somebody that we shouldn't forget in all of this excitement.
Last night, he had a very impressive game. I mean, first half he had, finished with I think it was 11-11 going into halftime. So, those are promising. I think the big thing for him and some of the other guys is just to get the reps. With the team structure as how this team is, it's hard for those guys to get a chance to play in those meaningful minutes. So this is time for them to kind of relax, have fun, and get back to just getting those instincts sharper and then playing through that.
That is John Wallace speaking about Deron Holmes, who last night dominated. 19 points, 17 rebounds as the Denver Nuggets beat the LA Clippers. They finally got a Summer League win. You had to stay up late to see it, but they won. And Deron Holmes looked like a man amongst boys. And I go back to what I said a couple of days ago. If you're a rookie, the absolute baseline for what you look like in Summer League, you got to look like you belong. Got to look like an NBA player. If you're in year 2, you got to be about the best guy on the floor. Every game. Deron Holmes being kind of in a weird spot between the two, having not actually played his rookie season, but still being able to be around an NBA team, be an NBA player, even though he didn't play. We're seeing him go to that second stage where second-year players normally reside, which is, this isn't new for me. I'm an NBA player. Half of the guys I'm competing against aren't. I'm going to show it. And the last 2 games, but especially last night, you got that from De'Ron Holmes. He dominated that basketball game. Even had 5 assists. But there's another aspect of what John Wallace said that I find interesting. Talking about the amount of time that these guys are going to get to play. We are right back to where we started. In many ways, right? We are right back to, I don't know that these young guys are going to be able to see the court. Right? Because we were talking about, last year was Russell Westbrook. There have been other veterans that have come through. Dario Saric was supposed to be a guy that played last year, but we're back to, the young guys aren't going to play a lot. They're going to get probably more time than they did under Michael Malone. But this is a veteran-led team. This is a veteran-dominated team, if we're being honest about it. Because you have 5 starters who are all veterans, and you add 3 veterans on the bench, and they may not be done. They still have 1 roster spot available. So the idea that the way forward for the Denver Nuggets was these young guys like De'Ron Holmes and Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther, the minute they got money to be able to spend on veterans, that's what they did. But what I have seen from De'Ron Holmes in Summer League, and you don't want to get carried away because he really should be dominating. His skill set, his role, I do hope that they find a way. The way I look at it is if you take the younger players, I say I want more of Julian Strawther and more of De'Ron Holmes. Or continue, I guess, more of De'Ron Holmes, but a continuation of Julian Strawther. Like, I think those are the 2 guys. With Peyton Watson and especially with Jalen Pickett, we're good here. If they carve out a niche, great. But I think the ones that there is more to be mined from the Denver Nuggets and from David Adelman, I think it's Strawther and it's De'Ron Holmes. How they're all going to balance that, as of right now, I think De'Ron Holmes, it's pretty easy. Play him next to Jonas Valanciunas. With Julian Strawther, a little bit more difficult, especially if they bring in another veteran guard. But those are the 2 young guys that I think that the Nuggets look at and say, those are the guys that we want to try and get a little bit more. They want to try and get more out of all their young guys, but those 2 guys especially, they feel like maybe they can turn them into something. Because here's the thing. Valanciunas, Hardaway, probably Bruce Brown, probably only going to be here a year. So find a way to develop those guys. There's certainly a lot to like with De'Ron Holmes and the way he's played at Summer League. Take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we're back to it tonight, baby. Rocks. Their march to history continues in Minnesota. The unofficial second half of the Major League Baseball season begins today, which means the resumption of the Rockies' chase for history. Their 22 wins at the All-Star break, the lowest in Major League Baseball since the 40s. You remember that decade, right? The 40s? And they are currently on pace to beat the White Sox, who only, if you are a Chicago, or if you are a member of the Chicago White Sox of 2024, the heavens have blessed you with the Colorado Rockies. You are living in infamy and being tied to the worst team in the history of modern Major League Baseball for all of one season. They said a record that could never be broken was the White Sox futility last year, and the Rockies said, hold my party deck beer. They're on pace to clear it, and not just clear it by a game, 4. They're well ahead of the pace as they begin the second half of the season tonight in Minnesota. But what can't happen for the Rockies here as we are about 2 weeks away from the trade deadline? They cannot do everything in their power to avoid making history. Here's what I mean by that. If the Yankees are truly calling about Ryan McMahon, trade him. And we talk about this every year around this time. None of these guys for the Colorado Rockies that are in their mid-20s are going to be a part of the next good Rockies team if one ever comes. So what is the point? And yet, Ryan McMahon continues to be a Colorado Rocky. I know injuries with Germán Marquez have complicated things, but anybody on this team that you can trade, you should trade. But here's the fear I have. That Dick Monfort is watching what's happening. Not that he's going to add to the team. I mean, let's not be silly here. Because if you were really trying to avoid dubious history, you should go out and make a move. Parlay some of these prospects and go get a veteran bat. Now, nobody wants the Rockies to do that because we know that the Rockies need to be bad, need to replenish their farm system and all that kind of stuff. But if you really wanted to try and prevent making dubious history, you should go out and add at the trade deadline. Because there are no internal options here to improve this baseball team. But what I would fear is that the Rockies would look at it and say, if we trade McMahon, Marquez, they're never trading Freeland, but they should consider it. If we trade them, then we're basically sealing our fate. That we will become the worst team in the history of baseball. And I am saying it is too late to try and prevent it now. The Rockies owe it. Not to me, maybe not to you, but to the people who have been following this team all year. They owe it to them to see this thing through to the end and be the worst team in baseball history. So they should do nothing to prevent that. In fact, in many ways, they should allow it to happen. They should embrace it. Anybody calls for anybody in a Rockies uniform, except maybe Ezekiel Tovar, you trade him. And yes, it will almost guarantee that the Rockies will finish with the worst record in modern Major League history. But it's been the thing they should have done for the last few years and have been unwilling to do it. My fear is they'll stand pat at the trade deadline to be out of some warped view of reality that maybe they will turn it around in the second half. I mean, even they wouldn't think that the Rockies would turn around massively, but when I say turn it around to not be the worst team in baseball history. That's all I'm saying. Win a few more games in the second half of the season than the first half of the season. That's what I fear. Because you can't tell me with the invention of an additional wild card and the number of teams that are in pursuit of that wild card that it's not a seller's market. If you're a team that's like, we are done, it is over for us, you might actually be able to drive up the price a little bit. And I know what the Rockies aren't offering isn't great, but how many teams have a left-handed bat like Ryan McMahon that the Yankees would covet? Not many teams out there that would be willing to do that. Supply and demand, right? You got what a lot of contending teams would want. Drive up the price a little bit. The Rockies are really one of the only teams that can say we have no chance at even making a run near the wild card. And they can benefit from it. But I fear that they won't. I fear that they say, nope, we got to keep it together. We keep it together and we can turn around and we can win enough games to avoid living in infamy. 2 weeks away here. We'll see. And it needs to happen. Just for the history, for the laughs, but also for a interesting science experiment. Because consistently losing 90 games wasn't enough for the Rockies to change the way they do things. Losing 100 games wasn't enough. How about losing 120, 130? Does that do it? I just want to see it. I just want to see how many losses it will take to make the realization set in that a change has got to be made. So if they just finish with 100, 105 losses, that's not going to do anything. They lost that many games last year. They need to make history. And admit it, you want to see them make that history. Now, you'll say, wake me up when they're about ready to break the record, and then I'll tune in, and I understand that, and I will keep you apprised. But we want to see it. 719-24-7, 1313. Back to wrap up the week right after this. Want to give you that national keyword to enter to win a trip for two to see the Black Keys at the U.S. tour stop of your choice. It is ROCK, and you text it to 95819 to enter. Again, that's ROCK to 95819. Today is the last day. You get more info at extrasports1300.com. One thing that I did not bring up that I should have this week, just because of the back and forth that has happened between between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic over the last few years. The ESPN piece that came out about him, if you are in the mood to look at Joel Embiid as a sympathetic figure, you can read that. And I don't even know that the constant battle and dogging Joel Embiid because he's not playing, he's ducking Jokic and all this stuff, I think it was more geared at Philly fans. Right? The Philly fans that said that one of Jokic's MVP was a perfect attendance award. And this constant, Joel Embiid is better than Nikola Jokic. And it was like, well, he's got to be on the field, got to be on the court to really decide. Yes, more often than not, when Embiid and Jokic have been on the court at the same time, Joel Embiid has been better, but it's been so few and far between. How can you even take it as truth? Like, who knows? How many times have they played against one another? It's only twice a year. Embiid has been dealing with health problems his entire career. I think a lot of it's the dogging on Joel Embiid is more aimed at the national media and at Philadelphia fans who think that Joel Embiid is greater than Nikola Jokic, which is, of course, completely preposterous. But the way that the Sixers handled Joel Embiid, a player that you knew going in was going to need, like, he wasn't going to play his rookie season. You already knew that. And the Sixers took him anyway because of his immense gifts and talents. And then they proceeded to have his rehab overseen by an intern. So you wonder if the fact that Joel Embiid's never been able to quite get right physically goes back to the fact that when he was first getting into the league in a moment, and I'll use Michael Porter as an example. So Michael Porter has been able to be available as much as he has been, in large part because of the way that the Nuggets handled him. And the amount of time they spent with him rehabbing, all of that kind of stuff. So, and they bore the fruits of that, right? A guy that people doubted was even going to consistently play at any point in his NBA career is playing 80, 81 games back-to-back years. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that the Nuggets handled Michael Porter from the moment he came into the league. And it is very different than the way that the Sixers did with Joel Embiid. So I don't know that they did the best for Joel Embiid there. And then you have the quote from Nick Batum talking about how he can't understand how Joel Embiid can even walk looking at his knee. Joel Embiid, setting aside the debate between he and Nikola Jokic, and that gets people riled up. If we just take Joel Embiid by himself, he is one of the bigger what ifs in the last decade or so in the NBA. He is, because when in the few moments that he's been right physically, he has shown that he's a dominant player. And it would have been probably the best thing about the NBA, Embiid versus Jokic. Twice a year during the season, maybe meeting in the NBA Finals. So there is that what if with Joel Embiid. And I know, some of the blame might go on the Philadelphia 76ers, but look, the guy came out of Kansas broken in many ways. He just hasn't been able to get put back together again, I suppose. And you hate that because by all accounts, Joel Embiid is a terrific person. Right? Like I've been critical of him. Some of the things he said I don't agree with, but it sucks that such great talent has been trapped inside a body that keeps breaking down. But there's another aspect of this. And it's Joel Embiid and his distrust of that organization, which probably started back when they were having an intern oversee his rehab. And remember, he got mad because the story leaked out that Tyrese Maxey called him out. Like, he should be at team meetings. I'm not saying he's completely blameless here, but you remember that when he was called out by Tyrese Maxey for not being in team meetings, and then that further emboldened Joel Embiid to distrust that organization. There's a very easy conclusion to come to with all of this. The Sixers and Joel Embiid should part ways. What I read in this piece by ESPN is a relationship that is damaged beyond repair. And there's blame to go around. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter who the blame truly is on. What's abundantly clear is that this relationship will never foster a title. Never. From a basketball perspective, but also the fact that Joel Embiid seems to not trust anybody in his organization. How can you win a title with that dynamic? So it's clear to me that Joel Embiid should play whatever career he has left in the NBA someplace other than Philadelphia. That's an easy conclusion to come to reading this piece for ESPN. However, the Philadelphia 76ers, with all of this going on, doubled down. With all the injuries, with the distrust, with the disconnect, with everything going on, they doubled down and gave Joel Embiid the league's most untradeable contract. Forget what you think about Bradley Beal. Joel Embiid's contract is the most untradeable contract in the NBA. Why did the Sixers double down on this? I don't know. This relationship, this superstar that is routinely broken down, I don't know. It raised my eyebrows when they signed him to the thing, but no one will take on that contract. The only recourse for Philadelphia is to do the same thing that Milwaukee did with Damian Lillard and Phoenix did with Bradley Beal. They're going to have to stretch him and release him and eat this money because they are not going to win a championship. And I know that the Sixers hype train is getting ready to leave the station. I know it. They got VJ Edgecombe. They have Tyrese Maxey. Paul George, I guess he's got to have his knee scope, but at some point people will say, if healthy, if healthy, if healthy. And that's all they ever say about the Sixers. If I'm Philly, I'm looking at this situation and saying, I have Maxey and I have Edgecombe. I'm done with Embiid. I'm done with Paul George. They are no further away from winning a title if they let Joel Embiid and Paul George go than they are right now with them. Get your future started earlier. And it's what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. It's what you've seen the Suns do now, probably a little bit too late for most people's liking, but they're there now where they're like, we're going to build this the right way now. And then Milwaukee's like, we got to move on. We're trying to win. We can't just keep Damian Lillard on our roster while he recovers from the Achilles. We got to move on. Sixers got to move on. I mean, that's pretty clear to me. I know it wasn't that long ago that Joel Embiid signed this contract, and it would be, I mean, you want to talk about how the Broncos got beat up when they released Russell Wilson. It would be much worse when if the Sixers do that with Joel Embiid. But they have to. This relationship seems beyond repair. Joel Embiid's body seems beyond repair. And everyone keeps waiting for the Phil. If they're healthy, it's the same debate about the Sixers as it is Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic. Well, if Embiid was just healthy. Yeah, if I was 6'3", charming and super rich, maybe I would be marrying Dua Lipa. But guess what? None of those things are true. Joel Embiid's not going to be healthy. Not consistently ever again. The Sixers are not winning a title with Paul George and Joel Embiid being the focal points of their team. It's never going to happen. So at what point are you just willing to move on and get started with the rest of your life and see if Joel Embiid can be a low risk, some level of reward for some other team? Look at what's happening with Damian Lillard. Yeah, he chose to go to Portland, which is not where people thought he would go. But you look more at it, you're like, that's a pretty good situation. But if Damian Lillard could have very well signed with the title contender, maybe Joel Embiid can do that. But it is a very good article if you want to read it over the weekend that ESPN did about Joel Embiid. And you do feel for Joel Embiid. You do, because he's on a list of unfortunately, a long list of athletes whose body just let them down. But there's all this other stuff, too, that it just like, how are they even coexisting right now? One other note, tomorrow, Switchbacks are back in action against Birmingham Legion. That game has a little bit of juice to it because Ronaldo Damas, who was the leading scorer for the Switchbacks last year, is now the leading scorer for Birmingham Legion. So that will be a storyline Roland and I will be talking about quite a bit tomorrow night. But ultimately now, it's not about what the Switchbacks think they can be. It's who they are. And what they are right now going into the second half of the season is at the bottom of the Western Conference table. And tomorrow, to me, represents a chance for them to say, yeah, we weren't able to figure it out in the first half, but we're going to here in the second half. And it's certainly all hope. They're not the Rockies, right? Like, all hope is not lost. They're not that far out of a playoff spot. But it's time, and in talking with James Chambers this week out at training, I just think there's this feeling of, even though we've been saying it, it hasn't happened yet. Now we have no choice. We got to go now. And they got this one game against Birmingham, and then they'll take essentially a week off while they play the last game of the Jägermeister Cup, and they can experiment with the lineup, do some other things. They just signed a goalkeeper on loan from the Rapids. We'll see if maybe he gets a look next week and how he fits into everything. But Switchbacks, this is a chance for them to start this second half on the right note, on the road against a former teammate and a guy that would fit really well with this team right now. I know they went out and made other acquisitions and have fortified other pieces of their team, but a Ronaldo Damas would fit very well with this club right now. That's on the way. Stephen Hogan told us he's working on it. They're going to get a goal scorer here soon, but they got to get going now. And then when the transfer window opens, then Hoagie will do his thing, and the Switchbacks will add a piece, and then hopefully away they go. But tomorrow night's, I think, an important contest for the Switchbacks, certainly. Because they can't afford to wait anymore. They got to start producing results. Or else they're not going to be within reach of this thing in a month and a half. So that'll be tomorrow night, 6 o'clock kick. Roland and I will be on the air at 5:30 right here on Extra Sports 1300. Don't forget, starting Monday, I will be doing the show out at the Warrior Games, which are being held on the campus of Colorado College, in addition to a few other venues. Gary Barry's where the track events are. But I'll be out there doing the show all next week, talking to a lot of our former service members who are now competing in the Warrior Games and representing their branch of the military and just being unbelievably inspiring human beings. And I'm looking forward to bringing you a lot of their stories throughout the week. And it's not like the Warrior Games are closed to the public. Come out, support. Hope to see you out there. DODWarriorGames.com for more information. With that, enjoy your weekend. Appreciate your patronage all week. And we'll talk to you Monday from the DOD Warrior Games here on Extra Sports 1300.